Hi, everyone. Welcome back to Your Next Business Bestie. My guest this week is somebody I've known for a very long time. This is Krystal. Hi, Krystal. How are you?
I'm good. How are you, Jen?
Good. We were briefly talking before I hit record, and we've known each other long enough that we haven't seen each other in 17 years because we have not seen each other face to face since I graduated high school in 2007, which
It's been a very long time.
we obviously, I mean, the joy of social media. Like, I don't feel like it's been that long. I know what's going on in your life, but I guess I'm really thankful for social media. But it feels really trippy that it could possibly have been that long.
Right? Yeah, it does. I mean, I've seen your journey and all of your growth and everything, but 17 years, that's insane.
Yeah, I can't. But long story short, Crystal and I have known each other since high school, right? We met
Hmm.
freshman year of high school, so we've known each other
Yes.
since 2004. Oh, we've known each other 20 years this fall
Wow.
and
When
haven't
did we
seen each
get
other for
so
most of
old?
it. I don't know. And then I see like a 21-year-old and I'm like, oh yeah, okay. I am 14 years older than that. Got it. Got it. But Crystal, why don't you tell everybody what it is that you do?
I do a lot of things, but primarily I am an indie author and freelance editor. And then I also work for a book coaching company as a book mentor and client manager that we help people who are need some help with their journey to become independently published authors. We help them along the way with all of the aspects of writing, editing, publishing, and marketing.
Beautiful. And I know what this term means, but just to make sure that everyone does, what does it mean to be an indie author? How is that different than like traditional publishing or all of that?
So, indie publishing or self-publishing, either term, they're interchangeable. That is the path where you do everything yourself. So, you do not pitch your book to an agent and you don't get picked up by a publishing house. And it was really important for me to take the self-publishing journey over
Hmm.
traditional publishing for like a lot of reasons. A lot of
I'd love to know.
reasons.
What are some of those reasons that this was the right path for your work?
Well, first of all, I'm a control freak. So when you go with, I mean, it really boils down to that. When you go the traditional publishing route, you aren't just writing to market to what people want to read. You're writing to what people think can sell for you. And that gives you a lot less freedom because you have to follow the trends a lot closer rather than necessarily writing the story of your heart. And I didn't want to change big aspects, especially my books are so heavily, they're romance books, but they're very heavily social commentary books. And I didn't want to have to backtrack that. I didn't want to have to change the spice level of my books, how much sex is in the books. I wanted to do all of that. And then there's also, you have the potential to earn a lot more in royalties. So traditionally, with traditional publishing, you get an advance. It can be anywhere from a couple $1,000s to, big, seven-figure things, which are very, very rare even for established big name authors. And you don't get any royalties until you earn that money back for the publishing house. And then you only earn between 5 to 10%, maybe up to 15% of your royalties on every book. When you self-publish, you generally get between 40 and 70% of your royalties. So the math to me just makes a lot more
Yeah.
sense. The flip side of that is you have to do everything yourself. But when you traditionally publish, you still have to run your own social media. These days, they want to make sure that you already have a social media following so that they know that there's a reader base. Um, Even the big name authors are either hiring PAs or doing it themselves for their email newsletters, things like that. And they get no control over the pricing of their books. They get no control over the cover art of their books. They have a lot less say in the editing process. And they just may never earn, most traditionally published authors never earn back their advance. And that's just the sad truth. So it's really hard to be one of these big name, especially in romance, which is a $1 billion industry, right? But romance is the largest genre. It has been for a very long time. It makes up 25% of all published works. And it's really hard to ever earn back your advance. And then you're just earning a couple dollars on a book, whereas you can earn 70% on your ebooks on Amazon and 65%, I believe, on your print books. So it just makes a lot more sense mathematically. And
Yeah.
I didn't want to give up the creative control.
I had no idea on the cut. Like everything you said is, I think I've gone through the publishing process with a client before. We got her book published earlier this year. It was a kind of a hybrid situation, which
Mhm.
was very cool. Her book's sitting right in front of me on my desk, and that was it's cool to be part of the process of someone getting their life work published. It's a nonfiction book, but I didn't know about the cover art. That is one that like that's surprising to me that when you go traditional, that like, you don't even get a say on cover art really. And so if an author doesn't make back the advance, do they have to pay it back, or is that a risk that these publishers take by providing the advances ahead of time?
The risk they take, you don't have to pay
Okay.
that back, because eventually the hope is that they'll make that money back. But yeah, I have a client who was traditionally published and she had two titles out, I believe, and she's never seen a dime. Whereas she hit bestseller status on the last day she ran a promo. She hit #1 in her categories, and is bringing in royalties now, and it's just a lot more fulfilling path for
Yeah.
her and for a lot of us. I think there's a big stigma against self-published because there's a lot of bad books out there, but there's a lot of bad traditionally published books too. I
That's true.
have read many bad books, both in both paths. But there's kind of this stigma that it's unprofessional,
Mm.
that, they don't use editors. That's true for a lot of people, but there is the professional way to launch your book. And at the end of the day, you're not selling your writing. They don't know you're writing until they click buy and they start reading. So you're selling all of the marketing that goes into it, and that's to make money off of it. And there are many, many indie authors who are building really wonderful careers. They say it takes about 20 books to earn a sustainable living. It's called 20 books to 50K. It's this whole movement within indie publishing. And if you follow a method similar to the one we use at my book coaching company, that when do about 4 books a year, that takes about 5 years to earn a sustainable income if you're doing it the professional and right way, along with marketing and everything.
Wow. And here you've published 5 books. I own all of them. I have not read the newest one yet. So 15 more books, Krystal. 15.
15. Yeah, I'm looking
15.
forward to it. I feel a lot like I did everything wrong with my first series. And I did do everything wrong with my first series. I didn't have any help. I was just trying to figure it out. The landscape has changed so much.
Mm.
When my first book came out, it was 2017. The landscape has changed so much. Amazon, which is, of course, where 95 to 98% of your sales will come from as an author, regardless of which path you go, that has changed so much, that I feel like I'm starting from scratch and I have kind of genre hopped a little bit. But about 15 more books. I can do it.
You got
I've
this.
got the next 2 series planned out, so we're good. We got this.
Well, let's take a journey through your books. And the first one came out in 2017. I think I finally read that series in 2020, 2021. And my mom has borrowed 2 of them, and I've told her that I need them back soon because I don't know why I feel better having them on my shelf. I love that series. I I knew it was going to be good because I knew that you were talented and I've known you a long time, but I was blown away by that series and the world. And I was sad when I finished the third book. I was sad. I wanted more. But tell our listeners what that first series is about, where the idea came from. Give them a little backstory.
Oh gosh, I hate that question of like, where do you get your ideas from? Because honestly, the truth for me is like insomnia and anxiety usually. Um,
I feel that.
I
I do.
do, I do a lot of my world building as a way to just like cope with life around me. I do a lot of my world building laying in bed trying to fall asleep at night. Um, but my first series is a fantasy romance series called The Scholars of Elandria. And in Elandria, there is a class of magic born people that have a natural affinity for earth magic. And they're kind of an elevated class within society. And then there's the sage, who is the most powerful of all of them. And then it follows her love story through the other books. And then we throw in a third love story or a second love story in the third book. And then there's a lot of environmental themes in there because of the earth magic. There is a class of people that I drew a lot of inspiration from both the Romani culture and Native American culture because they're treated very similarly in society as outcasts. So there's that political element to it. And then there is a rise of a patriarchal religion, and this is largely a religion free society. So that invasiveness of this like patriarchal um virus, for lack of a better term, that starts infiltrating the society, and what that does to the government, and how that shifts a very idyllic, honestly, but not perfect society. And when I was writing my first book, I kept running into this issue of like, I've got the love story. I know the love story between Amaris and Quinn, but I don't have enough conflict in this world because this was kind of my perfect world. There was this class of scholars that were earth magic, and Jen and I were both in our advanced classes in high school, and we had a very um elitist sort of view of
Yeah.
ourselves, I think, as a class. And that was bleeding into it, and it turned into a very different story. It turned into my journey of understanding that's not how society works, and that's not how society can work if we want a truly equal society. So it really morphed me, because I was much younger. The world had lived in my head for many years before I ever put it on paper. And I was reading in some forums, and somebody else asked the exact same question I had, only they were writing sci-fi. And they said, "My world is too perfect. I don't have enough conflict to tell a story. What do I do?" And that's how I felt about my book at that time. Was just, it was too perfect. It was a queer friendly society. It wasn't religious, like all of these, like I had imbued my values into the world building. And someone said, well, what would threaten that perfect world? And it was like a light bulb went off. So then came the class and differences, then came the issues with having this elevated class in society, then came the threat of patriarchy and anti-queerness, and that melded into the political overtones of the society. But it is a romance first and foremost, and I've always classified it as new adult because they're in their 20s and they're really trying to figure life out, but they have immense power that they don't quite know what to do with. And they aren't always very good at handling that power. So they're my babies. Quinn is my baby forever, my main character.
Yeah, you talking about it, I'm like, I want to reread that series because it's such just a comfortable, even with the conflict you created, it's a world that you just kind of want to slip into. And spend some time with them, but like
Thank
I'm
you.
remembering parts of it. I don't remember the books I read. They're like little details. Like I know I love them or I didn't, and I remember the storylines in general, but I am not one of those people that like remembers every little bit, but so much is coming back and just hearing you talk about it. All right. So when did the last book in that series come out? What year was that?
The last book came out in 2020, right in the height of the pandemic. So I had an online launch party, and I did not know what I was doing with marketing at all. So the Scholars of Elandria series is very much a friends and family were my audience series. And so that one came out in 2020. And then during that time, I had, a baby, and there was a, global pandemic,
Right.
and my health was declining. And so it was just not a good time. So my next book, my fourth book, didn't come out until earlier this year. So I
It's
went
only
almost
been,
4 years.
wow. I thought Hell's Revenge had come out years ago. Like I feel like it's been sitting. I did not think it was this year. And it's a big shift. I want to back up real quick before we move on to Hell's Revenge. Did you want to be an author growing up? Like, is this the path that you wanted, that you thought you'd be on and that you wanted to be on?
I remember always loving writing. I have some really, they're actually really good for like second grade creative writing stories. There's a Thanksgiving one with a turkey, and that I remember very, very well. And I found all those a few years ago and I looked through them and I was like, I was using like creative dialogue tags and sensory description. And so it was because I was such an avid reader. So not to toot my own horn, but to toot my own horn a little bit.
Yeah.
I think there was a time I wanted to be an author, but it was very quickly squashed that like the arts don't make you money. And so then went the path of archaeology, which is what I wanted to be for
Yeah.
most of my time. That's what I have a degree in. And that it wasn't until I took a class on freelance writing when I was trying to get out of teaching that I realized, hey, I can make money off of this. And so then my career became freelance writing, and then I finally had the time to sit down and write this story that had been in my head for so long.
That's awesome. All right. So 2024, book number four, take us into the world of hell.
Hell's Revenge, I don't remember exactly what was said, but the idea came to me during a game of Cards Against Humanity. I have no idea what cards were played, what conversation was happening. I really can't remember, but I just had this idea for a female naturalist turned pirate. So this scientist turned pirate. I've always loved pirates. Like before Pirates of the Caribbean, I loved the books. There were these books by, and I'm gonna mess up, I don't remember his name right now. He was the same guy who wrote the Redwall series. Do you
Oh,
remember those with the talking animals, like the talking
yes.
badgers?
I'm Googling
Um,
while you're talking Redwall series. Brian
Brian Jacques.
Jock. There it is. Yes.
Yes.
Brian Jock.
Okay, so Brian Jock wrote this duology of pirate books for like middle grade, called the first one was Castaways of the Flying Dutchman, and the second one was called The Angel's Command. And I checked those books out of the library over and over and over again. I have loved pirates for so long. And then, of course, I loved Pirates of the Caribbean. And Hell's Revenge was originally going to be a historical fantasy novel.
Mhm.
And then the fantasy elements kind of fell out of there. So it became straight up hard historical fiction. Um, and I had that idea for a while. I wasn't sure what I was going to do because I was still working on Scholars of Elandria at that time. And I wasn't sure what book was coming next because I have an infinitely long list of story ideas to keep me busy. And but then I couldn't get her out of my head. And but that's where it came from. Some
Yeah.
drunken night of Cards Against Humanity, something was said. I jotted a note in my phone and then I just couldn't get it out of my head. There are no glamorous stories behind where my where my book ideas come from. It is
It
not
makes it so
glamorous.
human though, like I think so many people and myself included, it's been on my bucket list literally my entire life to have a published book. I have a published poem from like high school, I think. But it is my big bucket list item is to publish a book and always has been because like you, I'm an avid reader and it makes it so much more obtainable feeling that it's like, yeah, I was playing Cards Against Humanity with my friends and I got this random idea and turned it into a novel. And I will say, when I saw you were writing a historical fiction, I was like, oh, historical fiction's not really my jam. I loved Hell. I fell in love with those characters, and the romance part of it was so it was helpful, of course. But again, I learned so much about the world of pirates because that's something I know very little about. But what you did a lot of research for,
I
I know
did a
you know a
ton of
lot, but
research.
you did a lot of research. What was that process like?
There was a lot of going to the library, sifting through books, checking out everything I could possibly find, finding tidbits, and getting inspiration from the female pirates that actually existed. So there's some really great books out there, nonfiction books on female pirates and things like that. But I can't remember the moment that I was like, oh, this is going to be set in the 1690s, which is right in the middle of the golden age of piracy. And I will not bore everybody with a bunch of details, but I happened to pick, and I wanted it with the like, I needed this like Jacobite plot and everything. Like, I needed this, so I needed it to happen in this time frame before it needed to be before all of the famous cast of characters that we know, like Anne Bonny and Jack Rackham. It had to happen before then. And that is the least researched time of the golden age of piracy.
Of course it
Um,
is.
so that was a journey, trying to figure out about the pirate round, which was the loop where pirates would go make their fortune by capturing ships from India. They would go all the way around Africa, capture those ships, make their fortune, come back and either retire or, live a fun little pirate life for a little while before they were captured. So it had to be before that. It had to be before William Kidd was hunting down all of the pirates. And I locked myself into this time frame and I'm like, there is no book that exists on the pirate round. It is like a couple paragraphs in all of these books. And so I did take some historical liberties for the aesthetic. Like at this time, they were not using wheels to steer their ships. They were using the rudder like stick thing at the back of the boat. That's just not glamorous. My ships need wheels. And there was an author's note about some of those liberties that
Yes.
I took. But the research process was so intense. And I thought fantasy was a lot of research because you
Yeah.
pull from a lot of different cultures and aspects and political things to create your own. But getting those historical details right was like a term paper. And that's part of the reason it took me so long was I think the research process would go much faster now that I know what I'm doing
Mm.
if I wrote another historical fiction, and I may in the future, I don't know. But it was a lot. It was, but I love
Yeah.
research. Like research is one of my favorite parts of the entire process.
That's so cool. I really can't believe that book only came out. this year. That's oh.
Yeah, April.
All right. Let's move on to book number 5, which just came out a month
November
ago.
1st. Yeah.
Not even. All right. Tell us about your latest book.
I have leaned heavily into the dystopian books, dystopian romance, for obvious reasons if you read the news. And so this is a very spicy, it is the spiciest thing I've written, book about vulnerability and power. And it's the story set about 100 years in the future where America has fallen into a theocratic monarchy. A capitalist theocracy is the term I use. Um, and queerness is illegal and punishable by death. So the book opens with Miriam, who has been running a queer BDSM website, um, thinking that she is about to be executed because she has been taken to the palace. And all she knows is that when this new queen took over a few years ago, she took on all the executions herself. They were no longer done locally. But it turns out that the queen is bisexual and she is a little flighty. She's not the most lovable character. And she has a secret harem that she invites Miriam to be part of. And so the cast of characters is are the characters in the harem plus the queen. And it is a really rawly emotional book, even more so than my previous books. The emotional trauma is really heavy in both of my characters, especially my male main character, Asher. Um, and because they're just living in this society where their entire existence is a threat,
Yeah.
to be alive as who they are. And so there's a lot darker themes in it. But it's overall a story of hope. It will be a 4-book series. And I also wanted to take a different spin, whereas most of the time when you're reading dystopian books, you're reading it from this like chosen one rebel on the outside. And I had the idea of like, well, what does it look like when a dystopia starts crumbling from the inside? So
Mm.
that's why everything is centered from inside of the palace with
Yeah,
the
because
queen.
now that you're saying that, Katniss Everdeen and I can't remember the girl from Divergent, what her name is right now.
Tris, was it Tris?
Tris, yes,
Yeah,
Tris. I love Divergent, by the way. I think it's
me too.
way underhyped. I mean, I love me some Hunger Games, but I love Divergent. So it's the only book of yours I haven't read yet, but it is next on my list. And you said it'll be a 4-book series.
It's a 4-book series. So book 2 comes out in February, and that one will be a polyamorous love story, which is a whole new adventure of trying to turn a romance outline into one with 3 characters.
Yeah. Yeah, that's incredible. Okay, so book number 6 will be in February then. I
Yes.
want to shift gears a little bit. Everyone should go buy Krystal's books. I talk about your books all the time. So,
Thank you.
if you are a reader, if you like reading romance, I love your first series. It will always hold, I don't know why. I just identified with those characters so much and loved that world. So, for those of you listening, if you are a reader, definitely go check out Krystal's books. I will make sure I link all of them in the show notes. Let's talk about community because I think a lot of people think indie author on your own. What kind of community have you found with other indie authors online, in person? What's that kind of part of all of this look like?
I did a lot of this alone at the very beginning, and
Yeah.
I think that was my big downfall. I mean, I was joining Facebook groups, but I didn't know the right Facebook groups to join. I was reading blogs, and so I think that's why I struggle so much with my first series. And it was in 20 so there's a thing called National Novel Writing Month, and I'm not going to get into the scandal, but National Novel
Oh,
Writing Month is you can Google it. It's not something I associate myself with anymore, but It's you write 50,000 words in the month of November. And it's been going on for well over 20, 25 years. And that's how I wrote my first book. I wrote the first 50,000 words of that book in a month. And eventually I started going to the what are called write-ins, which are where people get together and write through my local. I have a very active NaNoWriMo is what it's called, community. And I met a wonderful group of writers that we just hit it off. They are, the aunts of my child. They are wonderful. And so after getting to know them in 2017 or 2018, they invited me to join their critique group, which was a game changer for me as a writer. Because I was doing it all on my own, and learning from other writers who are critiquing your work, which is absolutely terrifying, to put your work out there, your rough
Yeah.
drafts, be like, please, please tell me everything that's wrong with it.
Ugh.
Um, and then learning how to critique other writers and what like that process was just as valuable as being critiqued. And so I found a really great community that way. Um, we had writing retreats. We got together. We were meeting weekly. I mean, we were all young and unattached and no kids.
Yep.
Definitely couldn't go to a weekly write-in anymore. But and it was great because we kind of wrote across genres, and that was a really beautiful community for me. Um, our group kind of fell apart during the pandemic, but three of them remain really close friends of mine. And they are the first people I go to, and I'm like, hey, I'm struggling. I need to talk out a plot. Or will you read this? Like,
Yeah.
read my back blurb because it's terrible and I need help. And so I think having an in-person community whenever possible, or at least somebody that you get really close knit with, is important. A lot of people use critique partners. And then since then, I've found that the indie writing community as a whole is really wonderfully accepting. And I've made most of those connections on Instagram, along with the bookish community. The Bookstagram community is also really wonderful and welcoming. And I think that community piece, if I had sought that out sooner, would have made such a difference in the quality of my writing. Because I mean, you've read Hell's Revenge. My writing got a lot better over the course of several books. And just knowing what to do, not feeling alone in the process. And now being on the other side of it, of being kind of a leader in this indie writing community and helping people build their community, is a whole like wonderful flip side of things.
Yeah. It's so I came up with my idea for what is go I'm putting it into the universe, what is going to be my first book. And you were one of the first people that I told. But also I posted it on threads that I didn't post the idea. I posted, I think I'm finally ready to write my first book. And if you're not on threads, get on threads because I say it's the happiest place on the internet right now. I did just get a Blue Sky account too, but I haven't spent a whole lot of time there yet. But Threads is such a happy place to be overall. And when I posted that I was ready to finally write my first book, that thread got thousands of views and comments, and I got so many new followers. And I haven't even named a character, or like I have a very, very rough idea of what I want to create. And I was blown away how people in this community show up for each other. And book reading's gotten popular again, like especially
Hmm.
this year, I feel like between TikTok and Instagram. And I love it. I'm here for it because the amount of times I get a like, hey Jen, I need a book recommendation text. Those are like my absolute favorite texts in the world because I'm like, well, here's 20 book recommendations for you. But I think it's such a unique place on the internet, and how, because you're all self-publishing, there's no competition. It's just more great content being put out into the world.
And I don't want to bash trad authors either, because trad authors are traditional authors are very warm and welcoming. And like one of my favorite authors, like she was one of the first people to follow me on Blue Sky. And
That's
she is
cool.
like a big
Very
name
cool.
USA best-selling author. Um but authors in general, because the thing is we don't have competition. We have what we call comps, or comparable authors, or
Mhm.
comparable books. We use our phrase comps to be like, who do I write like? Where do I fit? Where does my book fit in the market? Because readers who you're really targeting don't just pick up one book.
Right.
Readers, especially the like this wave of like book talkers and bookstagrammers, are voracious readers. And so you don't have to worry about this competition, because if they like a style of book that's similar to yours, they're at some point going to pick up your book, and that's a
Right.
really, really great feeling. And I think that I don't know if that's true for the art community as a whole, and maybe that's just a wonderful bohemian artist thing that the community is so welcoming, but the writing community is so welcoming. And I have had insane good luck on Blue Sky in the few days, the less than a
Okay.
week that I've been on there. I was added to a starter pack, one of the starter packs where you find people to follow that have things in common for authors of plus size characters. My most recent book, my whole this whole series, the American Harem series, has plus size main characters. And so I just like picked up all of these like readers, and
Very
I was
cool.
just like, this is great. Like I am. So yeah, Threads and Blue Sky really, really positive. Twitter used to be before the first mass exodus of writers and readers, but in general, the community is it's a beautiful community.
It's kind of funny. I feel like the whole community just shifts from platform to platform, depending. It's like everybody
And we
moves.
follow each other. Yeah, we find each other.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, even Stephen King, I've been laughing at everyone getting so excited that Stephen King is on Threads. He's from Maine. I'm from Maine. My mom owns every Stephen King book. So my mom's love for reading is how I fell in love with reading. So that I
Mhm.
associate that in a like nostalgic way to Stephen King, even though I've only read one of his books, I think, The Green Mile, and I read it when I was way too
That's the
young
one
and it
I've
gave me
read. Yeah,
nightmares.
that's the only one I've
That's, that's really funny. Yeah, we probably read it around
I
the
don't
same
do
time.
scary things. Scary things freak me out. So
Yeah, ironically, the book I want to write is going to be scary, which I'm shocked at. But yeah, so everyone's so excited about Stephen King leaving Twitter and joining Threads, and it's so funny to me because there's such a high chance of interacting with people right now. Threads has been around for a year. Those of you listening, over a year. It had 1 million downloads in the first day, which was astronomical. And I get this question a lot. How do you set up a Threads account? Technically, you already kind of have one if you have Instagram. Download the Threads app. It's going to ask you to sync it, and now you have a Threads account. But it is a very, very happy place on the internet. Um, there's no question out there where my politics and my beliefs lie. The day after the election, Threads was like this little comfort huddle of people that were grieving. And it was just nice to not feel so alone in those moments. And
yeah.
all you like, you tag something like, my friend Megs is a professional organizer for women with ADHD. And the first time she put out a thread, what are we going to call that? Like Twitter was tweeting. His thread,
I think it's just a post. I
just a
think it's
post.
just a
That needs to be
post.
threading or something.
Yeah.
But the first time she put one out there, and she tagged, like, I think she tagged ADHD, and she got like 600 followers like that. So people want to support you on Threads. So the small business owners out there, get on Threads, and you can be the most authentic version of yourself, and people are there for it.
Yeah. It's really great. The queer writing community
Mhm.
and reading community. I from Threads got added to an Instagram group chat of this just like beautiful group of queer writers, and it's astounding. I love it. I love the community that's out there.
I know the answer to this, but how important is representation to you in your books of like the LGBT community or having plus size? Like, what does that mean to you?
It's so important to me. Because there was a trend going around on Instagram after the election of like reading is political. Here's all the political things in my books. And one of my coworkers, who's a very successful rom-com author, um, posted, and you have to look a little harder. You have to really
Mm.
think about what the politics are. But she outlined like, here's all of these things that are clearly political in my book that you may gloss over. And I almost didn't do this book because I'm so heavy-handed on the social commentary. But then I was like, you know what? I'm going to do this because people need to know this is my brand. This is who I am.
Yeah.
And we need to be able to see ourselves in literature. And there's this idea of, there's this great essay on literature as mirrors, windows, and sliding glass doors. And so for those of us who are part of marginalized communities, I'm a disabled, queer, atheist, plus size mom, like I need to, I want to be able to see myself in those. Those are the mirrors. And then the windows are the letting people into those worlds and being like, well, I love romance. Let me try something with representation I'm not used to. What can I learn about this culture? Which is why racial diversity is so important in books, especially because when you look at the numbers, especially the numbers in the traditionally published field of the number of writers of color and how much smaller their advances are, how much, I mean, it's just how little marketing they get, how little support they get, and how rarely they're picked up. It's astonishing. And that's, indie publishing allows you to get that representation without somebody being like, oh, I think this might be a little too heavy-handed. No one's going to want to buy this. Well, that's not true. The readers are craving it.
Yeah.
And so it's so important for the people who want to see themselves, but also literature, no matter what you're reading, that's how you experience the world in a new way. That's how you can step into a new reality and expand your worldview. It doesn't matter if all you read is romantic comedy. If you're reading diverse romantic comedy, you are expanding your worldview. Everything is political, and reading especially is political. I just happen to throw a really heavy dash of it into my books.
Yeah, I think this is a perfect place to mention. After the election and after that trend, I started a group on Facebook called Books Are Political because there was this big debate on TikTok where people were saying, keep politics out of books. And like, no, books are political. So if those of you that, again, that are readers, if you want to search my group, Books Are Political on Facebook, we are doing, I think it's going to be monthly. We'll see if that gets overwhelming, book discussions around books. Like our first book is White Tears, Brown Scars, which I've never read and I've heard amazing things about. So all of you are more than invited to come hang out. And I really want to amplify voices that are not mine. I got a really nice message because that book it's heavy, and I got a message from a Black woman saying that she was so happy that I was having a discussion about that and that she thinks it needs to be a discussion between white women to do better. So it's a really interesting platform to have, and I don't take it lightly. So, but if anyone, I would love to get other voices in there because I think it's important. I think it's always been important, but I think we have to do shit.
Yeah. And if you're struggling to find those diverse voices in your writing from diverse writers, read more indie books. The indie books we are not shying away from it because there's no one to tell us, ooh, that's just too political for our publishing house. We're publishing what you want. And so searching for indie authors on social media is a great way to expand your worldview, get diverse books, support small business owners that are doing this largely all ourselves. And it's just a great way to support marginalized communities is by reading indie authors.
Beautiful. And maybe I'll have you send me a list of some that I can include in the show notes too.
I will.
You got into this a little bit, but this is a question I like to ask all my guests. what do you do when shit gets hard? And for like if there's writer's block or you're just or marketing your books or just feeling a little defeated like we all do sometimes, what helps you get through those moments where you kind of want to just throw the whole thing away, figuratively and literally?
Um, you know, I've learned a lot recently from the book coach that I work under on the difference between motivation and dedication. And in the past, I've really struggled with the writer's block and going weeks without putting words on the page. And understanding that I'm in this for the long game. And the people who strike it big the first time, like that's once in a blue moon, like that doesn't happen. And so I've had to really do some soul searching about what my dedication is and why I want to do this. And my why has shifted a lot. It used to just be like, I want to be a published author because that's cool. My secret dream is to be invited to the big Comic-Con in San Francisco one day and be a panelist. Like that's my long-term big dream. Some people want their books turned into movies. I just want to go to Comic-Con. Um, but my why now is people need my stories, right? People need queer romance stories and in this climate, and we need to explore these themes and make people think and give people a window into lives that aren't their own. And so remembering that and remembering that it's not about motivation, it's about dedication and sitting down and putting your butt in the chair and getting those words on the page when the muses aren't there, has been a real game changer for me.
I love that phrase, and a lot of listeners have their own businesses. Some are authors, some are not, but I think that applies to all of us. I mean, there's days that I'm absolutely not motivated to do what I need to do for my business. But you're right, it's the dedication I have, not only to my clients, but to myself and to my business and the
Mhm.
life that I've created. And it's the dedication to keeping that all going. I love that. That's really, really powerful. All right, I have two more questions that I can think of so far. First, couple tips or one big tip for someone who wants to write their first book.
Um, Put the words on the page. And I know that sounds like the easiest advice, but if you get caught up in thinking, oh, what I just wrote is terrible, and then you want to fix it, you're never going to finish your book. You have to write forward. You have to write. That doesn't mean writing in order. You can skip around for all you care, leave notes to yourself. My drafts are super messy when it comes time to editing. So write first, edit later. If there's things you need to look up, leave a note for yourself. You can fix it in revision, and just get the words on the page. Because if you get stuck in this cycle of walking away for a few weeks, or you get stuck in the cycle of, I'm going to go back and fix this last scene to make it better before I write this scene, you're never, ever going to finish. That's the one step forward, two steps back. So write until you have a completed draft, even if it is full of notes to yourself. And sometimes my notes are me swearing at myself, being like, what the hell were you thinking? This is terrible. Fix this later. I have written things like that to myself in my draft, but you just have to keep going. You just have to tell the story. There's a great quote about the first draft being you just telling the story of to yourself. I can't take credit for that, but it is it is true.
Yeah,
So that would be my biggest tip is don't get caught in this cycle of revision. Just get the words on the page. They don't have to be good. I believe it was Anne Lamott said you can edit a bad page, but you can't edit a blank page. Um,
so write
so
the damn thing. Write the
yeah,
damn
just write
thing.
the
That's
damn
what.
thing. Yeah.
Yeah. And then where can people find you? Where can they follow you on social? Where can they find your books? Obviously Amazon, but where are the best places to find you on social media?
I am mostly active on Instagram and therefore Threads, and I am at Krystal Craiker author on both of those. So you can find me there. And then you can search my full name, Krystal Craiker, on Amazon to find my books, or crystalincriker.com.
Beautiful. Well, I want to say thank you because your first series, I think now that we've been talking, that's when I got back into reading. I got really burnt out from, college and being a GT kid in high school and all of the required reading that I really
Hmm.
found my love for reading again in 2020. And I think a lot of people did, but your first series was a big part of that. So I want to sincerely thank you for that. And your
Thank you.
stories are so powerful. I literally, my friend Lori, that her episode will be a couple weeks before yours. She's an author too, very different type of writing. But I'm like, you need to read about hell, and I'm just holding the book in front of her repeatedly. So, uh,
I love my pirate Hell. She was fun to write. People are always like, "Are your characters based on you?" And I'm like, "No, they're who I wish I was because I wish I was this cool." Uh,
your characters are very cool, but you're also very cool. You created these characters. So, but heartfelt thank you because your stories are powerful and they do matter. This has been lovely. I don't know why I didn't think about having you on the podcast sooner, but it worked out perfect with the release of your fifth book, with so many more to come. Is there anything else you want to share with our listeners today?
no, thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Maybe we'll see each other in person before it's been another 17 years. Maybe.
Yeah, let's aim for that.
That'd be cool. That'd be cool. For all of you listening, if you want to find out more about what I do as a creative strategist, or if you want to be a guest on the podcast, you can find me on Instagram at LifeJensWay or jensway.com. Two N's on Jen, always. And thank you so much for listening. I'll talk to you next time on Your Next Business Bestie. Have a great week.